Okay, it is officially the rollover, and we're going to take a look at a few things here. One of the first things we're going to start off with, this is Japanese yen futures. We're looking at a weekly chart. I just wanted to draw to your attention some of uh, the key support and resistance levels that have been in place for quite some time. We're going all the way back to this is the 2016, so this is uh, July, August 15th. That spike high right there, and and then we've got this drop again. This is a weekly chart, so we've got this drop to the downside here that then fulfills right about December 12th, 2016. And then for the most part, everything is going a lot. It's just inside of consolidation, but we see more bearish uh, sentiment, and we're getting a lot more activity here on a weekly chart volume levels. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is when we're looking at Japanese yen futures and we see price moving to the downside, indicating weakness, right? Japanese yen weakness. That means the dollar yen is likely to move higher. And I mean, there's a few things. We're seeing the squeeze play develop here, and it's sort of channeling a little bit lower. Volume levels are starting to pick back up again. The bearish momentum continues to the downside here on this indicator. I still think that there's a lot more weakness to go, but when we look at the daily time frame, things look a little bit different. We're just traveling inside of this consolidation range, and I'll go ahead and open this up. And you can see on a daily time frame, the CCI and the momentum indicators here are just like all over the place. They just keep zigzagging right through that zero line. So here is support. This goes back from October 3rd, and then we've got this high right here, and that's October 15th, and then everything else for the most part just travels around sideways. A couple of days ago, last week, it looked like it was printing this bullish momentum, and it looked okay. We had a strong bullish candle, but we don't know until it starts closing above some of these resistance points. Now, I talked about this W bottom pattern forming here, and it could make another move lower and then find a return or a bounce where price might return back up. Now, again, I mentioned just a moment ago that on the weekly time frame, it looks pretty bullish. I'm sorry, bearish, and a lot more to the downside. But again, that's a weekly chart. Price can still return all the way back up to some of these October 15th highs on the daily time frame and still return back down and still maintain its bearish momentum is what I'm getting at. So we want to be careful. I still think it's pretty choppy for trading the dollar yen on most days. Today was a little bit better, but and it actually stretched out a lot further than I thought it was going to. But that happens. Sometimes it'll just sneak right past you. And I was also watching the dollar chart. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But it gives me an idea of when to stop trading some of these currency pairs and where to lock in some profits. So again, the Japanese yen futures looks bearish. I mean, if we get a daily candle that closes below the October 3rd low, obviously I would expect a lot more, and then take a look at it in regards to a possible continuation breakout trade and how likely is it, how far is it likely to go based on what we're looking at relative to this time frame, the daily chart. So I wanted to start off there. That's a pretty good place to begin. If we're going to start looking at some of these yen crosses, dollar yen trade, if the pound's going to go sideways after Monday's move and the euro dollar really doesn't have a committed direction anyway in either direction for a little while, then maybe we might see a little more activity here on the dollar yen. So let's take a look at the dollar chart. This is the dollar time frame. I'm sorry, this is the daily time frame on the dollar chart. We talked about this, a few times over the last few weeks, and today it still looks like this little head and shoulders pattern developing right here. These indicators are sort of indicating at this point that it's starting to, that this temporary top is holding for the most part. I would like to see a daily candle close below that support, any one of these two support levels here. I've got a low down here at approximately 95.65 on the dollar. So that hasn't happened just yet. But even though, I mean, how many times do we see this pattern? We see a bullish pattern, and then sometimes there isn't any follow through if price is going to continue to drop lower. It may print and eventually print another bearish candle with more momentum and some follow through eventually if it does close below some of these key support levels. So keep an eye on that. From an intraday perspective, I'm watching the dollar on the 1 hour chart and trying to figure out where it's showing signs of a top. At this point, and I mentioned this earlier, it looks like with some of these indicators that it was finding a temporary top. And again, it doesn't mean that this move to the upside is over with. It could power right through, the highs that I showed you here on the daily time frame and keep going higher. But for this portion of this trending move, I want to find clues for intraday trading. I want to find clues of where it's likely to stop and start going sideways so that I know it's time to get out of the positions that I'm in if I'm trading them and lock in profits. Sometimes the retracements are going to be a little bit harder or faster, the opposite direction depending on what you're trading, because of how hard it's dropping with the news. And I'll show you that in just a moment with the pound dollar, but that's exactly what we saw. So sometimes the retracements are going to be a lot deeper. You can't necessarily track everything with the dollar, but here on the pound dollar, I'm going to go to the pound trade. So I'll show you that setup in case you weren't in the, if you weren't following along this morning. So this is what I'm talking about. Sometimes if the move is hard and sharp and fast and it drops like today, 180, 190, 195 pips, something like that. And then the bounce is going to be obviously a little bit higher. So you got to be careful trying to time that with the dollar. What I'm doing with the dollar is trying to find clues of where it's likely to stall and stop and then go sideways and flat. That's about the time I want to get out. Unless, again, I'm in a pound dollar trade like this or something similar with an event that's very similar, economic data, political statements, announcements, things like that, that causes a big move. The market reacts to it. We know, I mean, all morning long we were waiting for this news. And then here I've got specific take profit levels anyway. That's really the key to the whole thing is to know where you're going to stop. Here I see clues of this part of this downtrend stopping and going sideways, possibly retracing a little bit higher. Now, as far as what am I going to do with it now, that's the next question. You know, am I going to trade an HL30 here? I would rather not. I'm just going to get this out of the way because it shouldn't even be there. This is already lined up the way it should have been earlier. So that's the 5 o'clock rollover right here. I would rather not trade a bounce off of support. I still think that there's a lot of momentum to the downside. I just don't know when it's going to pick back up again and give me another opportunity. So there would be a few things that I would look at. If price retraces back up to some of these resistance levels, let's say the level that it broke out of or close to it, then perhaps I would look for a reversal, and then if the trend is likely to resume at that point, trade that. That's what I would prefer to do, instead of just trading this all the way back up, because I don't know where it's going to stop. I don't know that it's going to go back up to that support low. Very often it does, and that's a very healthy retracement. After a breakout like this, we normally see price retrace to the level that it broke out of. Not always, but normally. I mean, that's a normal pattern, and we can trade that. We can wait for the reversal up there. That's healthy, but I don't know how likely that is right now with the amount of the momentum that was developed this morning. So as this was all developing today, and when this candle closed to give us our signal, this is the continuation breakout trade. So I waited for this one to print based on last week's consolidation range. We had the high and the low. There's my continuation sell signal candle. On that sell signal candle, I look straight at the CCI indicator, the Bollinger Band indicator, to make sure that they're separating away from each other. That shows a sign of strength. I look at the CCI indicator to make sure that it's printing follow through and momentum to the downside. That way I could expect price to continue to trend in the direction of the breakout. I still have to wait for the 3-pip entry. I got that on the next candle. I was into the trade, waited, and then we scaled out at 2 different levels on this trade. So this was a very good trade. I mean, it worked just for the most part exactly the way we thought it was. However, I want to point something out that made this even more powerful as far as the confirmation. That signal candle right there on the 1 hour time frame, that developed at the same time that I got this 4 hour continuation signal candle. This 4-hour candle closed below support, printing a continuation breakout trade on the 4-hour chart at the exact same time. This closed at the exact same time that this 1-hour signal candle did. So again, it was like multiple forms of confirmation. I talk about very often, when you see a picture perfect setup, it is. And that's the best one to trade, because you're always going to be tempted when price looks like this and it's choppy inside a consolidation. You're always going to be tempted to break your rules or to try something else because you're bored, or you haven't gotten any trades, you haven't seen any signals in a while, and you need to make money. I mean, that mindset right there is what can cause a lot of choppy. You're just grinding away at your account. You're just taking trades and you're not too sure that they're going to work, when it's just better to wait for the breakouts and just make money. Now this breakout developed, and we know this because we're watching the pound and the pound crosses because of Brexit, because we know that these events are going to take place. So over the weekend when I did the workshop, I showed you some of the videos from 2 years ago, and we traded breakouts just like this with Teresa May's comments back then. So this is not an uncommon event. We just have to wait for these opportunities like this and these breakouts. And again, the picture perfect trades like this, that's exactly what they are. There should be no hesitation. And whether you're using my system or somebody else's, again, when you get that perfect trade, take it. Like, don't hesitate. So again, this was a great trade. I just don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know if it's going to float higher and then reverse, or if it's going to come back down here and resume that trend to the downside. If it does, I would look for an opportunity to get back into the trade. Obviously, I mean, tightening up the charts here on the daily time frame. Again, when I go back here, we're talking about some of these lows at the 1.1980 level as a possibility. I'm not calling a short and saying that price is going to the 1.1980. What I'm saying is that if this trend continues and I get confirmation, I can trade it multiple times down to, and that would be one of my price targets. So again, I wouldn't sell it here at this level and then just hold for the 1.1980. That is not what I'm saying. And at this point, we still don't have a closed daily candle below the August 15th low. That's, again, that level that we've been watching and staring at. I talk about it in almost every video when I look at the larger time frame here on the pound dollar, is that August 15th low. That's what set up this consolidation, that high and that low. And here we're just now getting that candle to finally close below that support. It might indicate that there's more once that candle closes. Because these indicators, I'm using them the same way that I do on the 1-hour time frame, here on the daily time frame. This is the daily chart. But again, on this candle, the Bollinger Bands are separating away from each other the way they're supposed to. No divergence in the CCI. This looks like a perfect continuation sell signal candle. I won't know until price takes out the low of that candle. That's my confirmation to know that the trend has resumed and to start selling it lower. So that's why I got to be really careful if I'm going to get into a trade here on the 1-hour chart or the 30-minute with these little retracements, because sometimes you're just sort of taking smaller opportunities until it actually takes out the low on that daily time frame. That's when you know you've got more confirmation there. So we're going to do this carefully. I really don't know how many trade opportunities we're going to get over the next few days. I mean, we were watching the euro dollar and the euro dollar sort of bouncing around, but not really too committed. It broke out to the downside, but I expected that it was going to stall just like this. This one printed below that support low. We were talking about that this morning, and I put that price tag there just to indicate where that candle stopped, but I didn't think it was going to go much further than the low of that candle, and here it's sitting at 55 with that low of 65, so it didn't really move that far. And again, that was because I was getting indicator signals that were pointing out that this part of the move here, for the most part, was over with. Now, this was a relatively tight range. I've got to pick a trade, right? With the trade copier, I'm only going to take one trade. I've got to pick a trade, and the pound dollar was obviously the best, most reliable signal at that time. This was sort of just bouncing around, and the range was really small. I can't use a high and a low of consolidation that's only like 45, 50 pips and call it a true breakout. I've got to be really aware of, if I tighten up the charts, you can see it's just been choppy. All last week was really choppy. It's sort of a mess. So it may be a little while until I get another trade here on the euro dollar. Again, I don't have to necessarily trade breakouts. I could trade a bounce off of support and resistance. I just need to know that I'm doing it at a time, most likely during the New York session when there's more participation, less likely to see a negative retracement against my position. Maybe it would be backed, the move and the breakout, or that move would be backed with economic data that I could use as confirmation for the move. Different trades, different opportunities. I just might have to pick a better time to trade something that's not going to move that fast if that's the only signal that I get. So again, thank you for trusting me. If you're using the trade copier, this is exactly what I do with my trades. I manage these positions. I wait for, and calculate. And I'm an extremely patient trader. I'll wait as long as it takes to get my perfect signal, just like this. So this trade was executed. The pound dollar was executed with the trade copier, and I've got some videos on the Facebook page, our Best Forex Trade Copier Facebook page, reviewing the trades from today and giving a little more detail on the technicals and the specifics about getting into the trade and how I get in, where my exact entry is and the take profits and things like that. So if you want to watch that, you can go to the Best Forex Trade Copier Facebook page, and the video was posted just about 30 minutes ago or so. A Facebook Live that we did. So again, we'll be looking for more trades. I mean, I don't know how many more trades we're going to get leading into the end of the year, if it's going to slow down, but I'm going to be there looking for as many opportunities as I can.